Sometimes it's a kindness no one will ever praise. And sometimes, it's stopping for someone who looks too broken to be worth the trouble. The day Odette's life changed did not look special at all. The sky was the color of old bruises, heavy with snow. The wind pushed against her small body as if it wanted to send her back where she came from. Her boots were too thin, her cloak too small, and the road stretched ahead of her like a punishment. She walked alone, arms wrapped around a precious bundle, spices wrapped in cloth, bought with palace coin, ordered by the head maid to be delivered immediately. The Alpha King was returning, they said. The great ruler of the Shifter Kingdom. The Silver Wolf in human form. A legend whose name people spoke with a mixture of fear and pride. Odette had never seen him, and she never expected to. People like her cleaned the floors beneath such legends. They did not look them in the eye. Her job was simple, at least on paper: go to the merchant, buy the spices, come back quickly. Do not be late. Do not fail. Do not give Madame Bure another reason to be disappointed in you. Odette held the bundle tighter against her chest and lowered her head against the bitter wind. Lord, she whispered into the cold air, just let me do this right. Just once, let me get back on time. The wind tried to snatch the words from her lips, but she kept walking, one slow step after another, breath puffing white in front of her face. Behind her, somewhere beyond the falling snow, the palace rose on its hill like a cold, beautiful judge. To most, it was a place of wonder. To Odette, it was home and prison all at once. She knew every staircase, every draughty corner, every squeaky door. She knew which servants could be trusted and which would sell a secret for a scrap of favor. And above all, she knew Madame Bure, the head maid whose tongue was sharper than any blade and whose eyes saw every mistake. Odette had made many mistakes. She was too soft, they said. Too distracted. Too quick to stop and help someone else, even when there was work to be done. Kindness doesn't keep bread on the table, Madame Bure liked to say. Obedience does. The words had carved themselves into Odette's heart. Still, there was a part of her that refused to believe they were the whole truth. So she walked through the storm, trying with all her strength to be both kind and obedient, to honor both the call of her conscience and the voice of her superiors. The snow grew deeper. Her toes went numb. She adjusted her grip on the bundle of spices and carried on. Far ahead, the road curved near a line of trees. She could just make out the dark shapes through the white haze. As she drew closer, she frowned. There was something in the snow that didn't belong. At first, she thought it was a fallen branch. Then a discarded cloak. Then, as her eyes focused, her breath caught. It was a wolf. Huge. Silver-furred. Beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. He lay half buried in the snow, sides heaving with ragged, shallow breaths. His fur was soaked and matted with blood. His body shivered weakly, as if fighting a battle it was already losing. Odette froze mid-step. Every story she had ever heard about shifter wolves surged into her mind. They were protectors, warriors, soldiers of the Alpha King. They were also deadly when threatened. No one would blame her if she walked around him and hurried on. No one would even know. She stared at the animal, heart racing. The spices in her arms suddenly felt very small and very far away. If she kept walking, she would likely make it back in time. Madame Bure would have no cause to punish her. The feast would go on. The palace would be pleased. If she stopped, she would be late. And being late, for her, never came with gentle consequences. Duty or compassion? Her mind immediately reached for excuses. Maybe he was already too far gone. Maybe she could do nothing. Maybe it was foolish to risk her own position for an animal that would never even know her name. Then another thought rose quietly, cutting through the noise. She remembered the words from her tattered book of Psalms. The stories of the one who left the 99 to go after the one that was lost. The whisper she had heard in her heart all her life. Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. Lord, she whispered, voice trembling, what am I supposed to do? The wolf's eyes flicked open. They were not the wild, empty eyes of a beast in rage. They were clouded with pain but startlingly aware. He looked at her. Not as prey. Not as an enemy. Just as if asking a question she could not hear. Odette's fear did not vanish, but something else rose with it. A fragile, stubborn compassion. She looked down at the bundle of spices in her arms. She thought of the kitchen fires, the simmering pots, the heavy footsteps, and the sharp words waiting for her. Then she thought of this creature, alone in the snow, fighting for one more breath. Her arms loosened. The spices dropped into the snow with a soft thud. I can't just leave you here, she murmured. The decision hurt, but it felt right, like setting a broken bone. Painful in the moment. Necessary for true healing. She stepped closer to the wolf, carefully, watching him for any sign of aggression. Easy, she whispered. I'm not going to hurt you. Up close, she could see the wounds more clearly, deep gashes along his side, a puncture near his shoulder, the faint, ugly discoloration around the edges that looked like poison. Her stomach turned. The healer. If she could get into the healer's cottage, maybe there was still a chance. It sounded impossible even inside her own head. The wolf was massive, easily 3 times her size. The storm was getting worse. The road between here and the cottage was long and rough. But sometimes faith does not ask, is this reasonable? Sometimes it simply asks, will you try? Odette swallowed, wiped her wet cheeks with the back of her hand, and nodded to herself. All right, she said softly, almost as if answering that quiet voice inside. Let's get you out of here. It was harder than she imagined. The wolf was limp, his muscles too exhausted to help. She looped her arms around his thick neck and shoulders, straining with all her might. Her feet slipped in the snow. More than once she fell to her knees, gasping, only to force herself up again, dragging and lifting in desperate, clumsy bursts. Her muscles burned. Her back screamed. Her fingers went beyond numb into a deep, aching pain. But slowly, step by step, she moved him. When she could no longer trust her strength, she leaned into stubbornness. When her stubbornness faltered, she leaned into that simple, stubborn prayer that had followed her since childhood. Help me. Just one more step. Just one more breath. The snow swirled around them as if trying to hide this strange, fragile procession, a small servant girl hauling a dying silver wolf through a winter storm. By the time the healer's cottage finally came into view, Odette was dizzy with exhaustion. The windows glowed warm and golden against the dark, the sight like a promise in the middle of all that cold. She stumbled to the door and kicked it, too tired to knock gently. Please, she shouted, voice cracking. Please, he's dying. The door opened to reveal the healer, an older woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. Those eyes widened at the sight of the wolf. For heaven's sake, the healer breathed. "Bring him in, child. Quickly, before the cold and the poison finish him." They pulled him inside together, Odette using the last of her strength to help haul him onto a low pallet near the fire. Warmth washed over her in a wave. The cottage smelled of smoke, herbs, and something like safety. Odette sagged against the wall, breathing hard. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were shaking. She watched as the healer bent over the wolf with practiced urgency. "Poison," the woman muttered, fingers probing gently around the wounds. "Nasty work. Whoever did this meant for him to die slowly." She glanced at Odette. "You did well to bring him," she said. "Now go sit. Try not to fall over. I'll need you." The night stretched out, long and blurry. The healer worked tirelessly, cleaning wounds, pressing poultices against the torn flesh, murmuring prayers and instructions in equal measure. She mixed bitter liquids and tipped them carefully between the wolf's jaws, massaging his throat until he swallowed. Odette fetched water. She wrung out cloths. She mopped up blood and wiped sweat from the healer's brow. Every time the wolf let out a low, broken sound, her heart tightened. It was strange how quickly she felt responsible for him. He was a stranger, a creature, a nameless life that had simply appeared in her path. Yet she felt as though some invisible thread had tied their stories together in that moment on the road. When the healer stepped away to grind fresh herbs, Odette found herself alone with him. The firelight painted his fur in ripples of gold and shadow. His sides rose and fell in uneven bursts. His eyes were half closed, but they flicked toward her as she moved. She sat down near his head, legs tucked beneath her, hands clasped in her lap. "I'm sorry about the spices," she whispered, a tired, humorless laugh escaping her. "Madame Bure is going to be furious." The wolf did not respond, of course, but there was something strangely comforting about talking to him. "Listen to me," she said softly. "Worrying about spices while you're lying here fighting for your life." Her smile wobbled. "I don't know who you belong to," she went on. "I don't know whose pack you're from. I don't even know if you'll live through the night." Her throat tightened. "But I know this, you are not alone right now. I won't leave you." Tears burned behind her eyes, then spilled over. She reached out, hesitated, and then gently laid her hand between his ears, fingers sinking into damp fur. "You're safe," she whispered. "For as long as I can keep you that way." Her voice dropped into a trembling prayer. "God, if you're listening, please let him live. And if this costs me everything, then give me the courage to endure it." On some strange impulse, shy and intense, she leaned down and pressed a small, trembling kiss against his brow. The moment felt fragile and holy, as if the room were holding its breath. The wolf's eyes slipped fully shut. His breathing, though still rough, grew just a little more even. Odette sat back, feeling utterly drained, and at some point, lulled by the crackling fire and the rhythm of his breaths, she fell asleep in the chair beside him. Morning came too soon. She jerked awake, every muscle protesting. The healer was already up, bending over the wolf, checking his wounds with practiced care. Odette scrambled to her feet, wincing. "How is he?" she asked, voice hoarse. The healer's expression softened. "Stronger than I expected," she said. "The fever's broken. He's not out of danger, but he has a chance now." Relief crashed through Odette so powerfully her knees nearly gave out. "Thank you," she whispered, the words more to heaven than to the healer. Then reality slammed into her. The spices. The time. The storm. The palace. Madame Beau. I have to go, she gasped. I stayed too long, I? The healer studied her face, reading the fear there. Go, she said gently. I'll watch him. Take the path through the lower woods, it's shorter. And child. Odette paused at the door. Hold your head high, the healer added. You did what was right. Odette nodded, though dread was a heavy stone in her stomach. She looked back at the wolf one last time. Stay, she whispered to him. Stay in this world. Please. Then she stepped out into the cold again. The walk back felt even longer. Her limbs were heavy. Her lungs burned. Her mind kept replaying the same scene, Madame Beau's face, the missing spices, the disappointment, the anger. By the time the palace came into view, she could hardly feel her fingers. She slipped in through the servants' entrance, hoping foolishly that perhaps, somehow, no one had noticed how long she had been gone. Perhaps the storm would be blamed. Perhaps she would be given another chance. The hope died the moment she heard her name. Odette. It cracked through the hallway like a whip. Madame Beau stood in front of the kitchen doors, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. Servants lingered nearby, pretending to work, eyes filled with curiosity and dread. Odette swallowed. She began, but the head maid's voice sliced over hers. You were sent on a simple errand, Madame Beau said. A straightforward task. And yet you vanished for half the night like some irresponsible child. Odette opened her mouth, but the words tangled. Child. Irresponsible. Failure. She had heard those names before. They still hurt. She forced the truth out, even though she knew it would not save her. I'm sorry, madam, she said. On the road, I found a wounded wolf. He was poisoned, nearly dead. I took him to the healer and... A wolf, Madame Beau repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. She let out a cold, humorless laugh. So you abandoned your post, disobeyed direct orders, and lost expensive spices, because of an animal. There was a murmur among the servants. Some looked at Odette with pity, others lowered their eyes, relieved it was not them. Odette's face burned, but she pushed on. I couldn't just leave him there to die, she pleaded. He was suffering. If you had seen. Enough, Madame Beau snapped. The word slammed into the corridor like a door. I am done giving you chances, she said, voice rising. The king returns soon, and instead of having his feast properly prepared, we have delays and excuses. She lifted her chin, making sure everyone heard. You are dismissed, she announced. Pack whatever belongings you have and be gone by nightfall. You will not set foot in this palace again. For a moment, Odette thought she had misheard. Dismissed. Fired. Thrown out of the only home she had, for the sake of a wild creature that did not even know her name. Madam, please, she whispered. This is my home. I have nowhere else. Then perhaps you should have thought of that, Madame Beau said coolly, before you chose beasts over bread. Something inside Odette cracked. I only tried to do what was right, she said, voice shaking. Madame Beau stepped closer, perfume sharp and suffocating. In this world, she hissed, right is whatever keeps the powerful happy. Remember that, outside my walls. Odette walked away, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of them. She climbed the narrow stairs to her tiny room, each step heavier than the last. Inside, everything was painfully familiar: the narrow bed, the chipped mug, the little crack in the wall where she had once tucked folded prayers and unsent letters. She sat on the edge of the bed and folded her hands, but the prayer would not come in neat sentences. Her thoughts were ragged and raw. "Lord," she whispered, "what do I do now? I tried to help. I thought you'd be with me if I chose mercy. But now I have nothing." Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and hot. Have you ever been there? Punished for doing the right thing. Misunderstood by the very people you were trying to serve. Wondering if the voice that led you into kindness has left you alone in the ruins. Odette packed slowly. 2 worn dresses. A shawl. Her tattered book of Psalms wrapped carefully in cloth. Each item she placed in the bag felt like a goodbye, not just to things, but to the version of herself that believed this palace might one day feel like home. When there was nothing left to fold, she stood, wiped her face, and tried to smooth the grief out of her expression. If she was going to be thrown out, she would at least walk with what dignity she could gather around her shaking frame. She stepped back into the hallway. The sounds of the palace washed over her: clinking dishes, faraway laughter, footsteps, the low hum of a place that would go on perfectly well without her. Her heart ached, but she kept walking. Down the servants' staircase. Along the lower corridor. Toward the back doors that led out into the world beyond the palace grounds. With each step, the life she knew unraveled behind her. At the bottom of the stairs, she turned a corner. And stopped. Her name hung in the air, but it did not come from the sharp tongue she had grown used to. It came from a voice she had never heard before. Odette. The sound of it was deep and steady, filled with command and something else she couldn't quite name. She lifted her gaze. Standing in the corridor, surrounded by guards who dropped to one knee as if pulled by an invisible force, was a man she had never seen and yet felt a strange, painful familiarity with. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes lined with silver. His hair was the color of starlight on steel, and a faint scar crossed his brow. His eyes, were a shade she recognized more than any other in the world. They were the eyes of the wolf she had found in the snow. The guards knelt in unison, heads bowed. The man did not look at them. He was looking at her. Odette's breath caught in her throat. She did not understand how it was possible. But she knew, with sudden, startling certainty, exactly who he was. She did not know it yet in words. Not fully. Not with the weight of his titles and the sound of trumpets and the echo of a herald's announcement. But in her heart, she knew. The dying wolf she had carried through the storm. The wounded creature she had prayed over and kissed in a healer's cottage. The life she had thought she was losing everything for. He was the Alpha King. The moment stretches, fragile and unreal. Odette stares at the stranger standing in front of her, noticing things she wouldn't dare linger on in an ordinary nobleman, let alone in a king. There is tiredness in his eyes. Faint lines of pain around his mouth. He holds himself like a man who is standing by sheer willpower, like every breath is a decision. The healer's work has kept him alive, but the battle he fought still clings to him like a second skin. Then the man speaks, and his voice is deep, steady, and strangely gentle. He says, "You carried me." Those 3 simple words fall into Odette like stones dropped into deep water. carried me. Her lips part, but for a moment there is no sound. Then she breathes, softly, in stunned realization. You were the wolf. A hint of a smile touches his face, as if he is almost amused by the truth. I was, he replies. For a while. Not my most graceful moment. The guards around them exchange confused glances, unused to hearing their king talk like this, with quiet warmth instead of cold authority. The head maid, Madame Bure, hears the commotion and emerges from the hallway behind Odette. Her body bends into a practiced bow even before she reaches them, her voice smooth and oily as she speaks. Your Majesty, forgive the disorder. If I had known you were in this wing, I would have. Without even looking at her, the king cuts in. You dismissed this maid. Silence falls like snow. Madame Bure straightens, her eyes flicking nervously between Odette and the man in front of her. Well, she begins, she was disobedient, sire. Irresponsible. She abandoned her duties and wasted palace resources on saving my life. The king interrupts, his tone suddenly sharp. Her mouth snaps shut. The king steps closer to Odette, his gaze fixed on her face, not on her worn dress or simple shoes, but on her eyes, as if he is trying to match this version of her with the memory of the girl in the snow. He speaks clearly so everyone can hear. 3 nights ago, he says, I was lying on the side of a road, poisoned and fading. I remember the snow. The ache. The way my body refused to obey me. His eyes soften as he continues. And then I remember a girl's voice. Hands that shook, but did not abandon me. A prayer. A kiss on my brow. Odette feels her cheeks blaze with heat. That memory was supposed to be between her and God and the wolf she thought was dying. She had never imagined having it repeated aloud in a palace hallway. The king turns his head slightly, looking directly at Madame Bure now. This maid, he says, chose mercy over safety. Compassion over fear. She carried a creature she believed to be nothing more than a soldier's wolf through a storm, knowing it could cost her everything. His gaze hardens. And you rewarded that by casting her out. Madame Bure's face drains of color. Your Majesty, I had no idea. No, he says, you didn't. Because you did not ask. You saw disobedience where there was sacrifice. Incompetence where there was courage. Then, once again, he looks back at Odette, and his voice softens in a way that makes her chest ache. What is it you want, Odette? He asks. She can barely breathe. What does she want? Her mind scrambles. She could say she wants her job back. She could say she wants a home, a place, a life that isn't always one mistake away from ruin. She could say she wants to stop feeling like a burden in every room she enters. But all those words feel too big. Too complicated. So she whispers the one small truth she can hold. I only wanted to help, she says quietly. For a moment, the king's eyes look suspiciously bright, as if her simple answer has reached some hidden place in him. And you did, he says. Twice. You helped a dying wolf, and you helped a weary man remember there is still kindness in this kingdom. He straightens then, lifting his voice so that every servant in the corridor can hear his words. From this moment forward, he declares, Odette is reinstated. And more than that, he lets the sentence hang in the air. Madame Bure flinches even before he finishes it. She will serve in my personal household, he continues, under my direct authority. A murmur ripples through the gathered servants, a low wave of shock and curiosity. Odette sways a little. She feels as if the floor has tilted beneath her. "Your Majesty," she stammers, I'm not. I don't have the training to." "You have the heart to," he answers gently. "The rest can be taught." Then he glances at Madame Bure once more, and there is no softness left in his eyes. "And any further mistreatment of her," he says, "will be taken personally." Madame Bure bows, but behind her lowered head, something dark curls and coils, like smoke from a smothered fire. Life for Odette changes quickly after that. She moves from her cramped little room near the kitchens to a modest chamber in the king's private wing. The walls are clean. The bed is wider. There is even a small window looking out over the palace gardens, now buried in snow. It feels like waking up in someone else's story. Sometimes blessings come wrapped in so much change they almost look like punishment. We pray for a door to open, and when it finally swings wide, the light that spills through it hurts our eyes. Odette clings to routine as if it were an anchor. She rises before dawn to help prepare the king's breakfast. She carries messages and reports. She tends the fire in his private study and makes sure fresh linens are laid out in his chambers. The first time she enters his room, she pauses at the threshold. For a king, the space is strangely simple. Books lie stacked on tables. Maps are rolled out across a desk. A sword leans against the wall beside a pair of boots still dusted with travel. This is not a room crafted for show. It belongs to a man who lives in motion. On the bedside table, she notices something that makes her breath catch. There, beside a lamp, lies a small, dried sprig of herbs, tied with a bit of thread. The same kind of herb the healer had used on the wolf's wounds. He kept it. He kept a piece of that night. As a reminder of her. At first, Odette tries to stay invisible. She moves quietly, speaks only when spoken to, and keeps her gaze low. But the king, Rouven, though she never dares say his name aloud, seems determined not to let her disappear. He asks her questions no one has ever cared about. He asks where she grew up. She tells him about an orphanage near the river, about shared beds and shared bread and the way she would stare at the water, wondering where it went and if she would ever go somewhere too. He asks if she has family. She shakes her head, explaining softly that she has no living relatives, only a few faded memories and a lot of empty spaces. He asks what she reads when she can steal a quiet moment. She smiles shyly and mentions an old, torn book of psalms and stories, shared among the maids when the work is light and the moon is high. One evening, as they sit in his study with the fire casting warm light over the shelves, he asks her a question that startles her. He looks at her intently and says, "Do you still pray, Odette?" She hesitates, fingers tightening on the tray she holds. "Yes, Your Majesty," she answers softly. "I do." His eyes search hers. "How?" he asks. "After all this? After being punished for what your faith led you to do?" Odette turns her gaze to the flames. "Faith doesn't promise that doing right will always be rewarded," she says quietly. "Just that it matters. Even if no one sees. Even if it costs you." He watches her in silence for a moment, and the kingly mask slips a little. Beneath it, he looks just like a man who has carried too many burdens for too long. "When I was lying in that snow," he says in a low voice, "I thought, maybe this is what I deserve. After all the lives I've taken to protect this land." He pauses, and his voice roughens with emotion. And then you came, he continues, carrying me as if I were worth saving. There is a silence between them, rich and heavy with unspoken things. Odette's heart beats more loudly in her chest. Everyone is worth saving, she replies, almost in a whisper. Even kings, he asks, with a sad, almost self-mocking smile. She turns her head and meets his eyes fully. Especially kings, she answers, who have forgotten they are human. The words hang between them like both blessing and rebuke. He lets out a soft, disbelieving breath. Most people try to impress me, he says. You remind me I'm just a man. Odette feels a flush rise in her cheeks. Forgive me, sire, she murmurs. I meant no disrespect. I'm not offended, he says quietly. I'm grateful. His gaze lingers a little too long, and she feels that look like a touch. She stands abruptly, smoothing her skirt as an excuse to move. I should check on the linens, Your Majesty, she says. As she leaves the room, her hands tremble. Some feelings begin not with thunder, but as a whisper. Not with fireworks, but with a quiet awareness. The way his voice warms when he says your name. The way your heart leans forward when you hear his footsteps in the hall. Odette knows the danger of such awareness. She knows the distance between her station and his could swallow her whole. So she does what many of us do when something sacred and scary begins to grow, she pretends she doesn't feel it. Meanwhile, the rest of the palace remains unchanged. Madame Bure still rules the servants with sharp eyes and sharper words. Her anger at Odette's new position simmers beneath a surface smile. There is something cold in her that does not forget humiliation. One afternoon, Odette hurries down to the storerooms to fetch candles. She moves quietly, hoping to be in and out without drawing attention. As she turns a corner, she hears voices. She stops. Madame Bure is speaking, her voice low and sharp. A man answers her, his tone smooth and charming, with a thin edge of greed. Odette presses herself against the wall and listens. The man says, lower the quality of the grain. Cut the spices in half. No one will notice. Madame Bure replies, and the ledgers? I'll adjust them, the man answers. The king is too busy with border disputes to count loaves of bread. Madame Bure laughs softly. As long as our share increases, she says, I don't care if the palace eats watered soup for a year. Odette's blood runs cold. This is more than meanness. This is theft. Theft from the same mouths that already scrape to survive. She shifts backwards, trying to slip away, but the sole of her shoe scuffs against a loose stone. The sound is small, but in the tense quiet of the storeroom, it might as well be a shout. The man's voice sharpens. Did you hear that? Madame Bure's footsteps come closer. Odette's heart hammers. She imagines being dragged out, accused of spying, silenced before she can ever speak a word. At that moment, a shout from the courtyard echoes through the stone. A guard calls, message from the eastern border. Madame Bure hesitates, then curses under her breath and turns away. Later, she mutters. We'll finish this later. Their footsteps retreat, heading toward the upper halls. Odette exhales shakily. Truth is heavy. Once you're holding it, pretending you don't see becomes its own kind of lie. She realizes she is now carrying a dangerous knowledge. The king trusts her. The other servants respect her. Madame Bure resents her. If she speaks up, she may lose everything. If she stays silent, the vulnerable will keep paying the price. She presses a hand over her racing heart and whispers, "Lord, what do I do?" Days pass. The king's duties multiply. There are rumors of unrest at the borders, of shifting alliances and nobles pushing for more influence. To reassure the kingdom, a winter ball is announced, a night of music and splendor to show the people that their king is alive, strong, and in control. Servants whisper about it excitedly. They wonder what he will wear, who he will dance with, whether he will finally announce a queen. Names of noble ladies float through the gossip like bright, fragile bubbles. Odette tries not to listen. It shouldn't matter. He is a king. She is not. Stories like hers do not end with crowns. One evening, after a long day of preparations, she carries a tray of simple food to his private chambers. He stands by the window, looking out into the snowy night. His shoulders are heavy, his posture quiet. The crown sits on the table beside him, as if even he is tired of its weight. She sets the tray down gently. "You should eat, Your Majesty," she says in a soft voice. He turns, his eyes tired, but they warm when they land on her. "If you keep feeding me like this," he teases gently, "the bards will stop calling me the lean silver wolf and start singing about a king who grew soft in peace." "Peace is allowed to be soft sometimes," she replies. "Sire." He steps closer, close enough that she can see the faint stubble on his jaw, the tiny scar at the corner of his lip. "Is that what you want for your king?" he asks quietly. "Softness." She swallows. "I want you to stay alive," she answers honestly. "To rest. To remember you are more than your battles." The last words slip out before she can catch them. His eyes darken with something she can't quite name. "When I was lying in that snow, Odette," he says, "I didn't think it mattered whether I lived or died. The throne felt like a weight that would crush me either way." He takes a small step closer. "Then I woke up," he continues, "and the first thing I saw was you. Tired. Shivering. I swollen from crying. Still watching over me as if my life meant something." His fingers move, almost of their own accord, brushing a loose strand of hair away from her face. Odette feels the touch all the way to her bones. "I have thought about that night every day since," he confesses. "About your hands. Your prayer. Your kiss." Her breath catches. "That was," she stammers, "I didn't know you were a king," he finishes gently. "I know. That's why it matters." Silence stretches between them, electric and fragile. He leans in slightly, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "Tell me I'm imagining this," he says. "Tell me it's only gratitude and not something else." Odette's heart pounds so loudly she wonders if he can hear it. Every warning bell in her mind is ringing. He is her king. She is his servant. The line between them is thick and unforgiving. Nothing good can come of crossing it. And yet, beneath all that fear, there is a quiet, blazing truth: she has fallen in love with the man she met in the snow. She doesn't answer with words. Instead, with trembling courage, she closes the small distance between them and presses her lips to his. The kiss is soft at first, hesitant, like a first prayer whispered into darkness. Then something inside them both breaks open. His hand slides to the back of her neck, drawing her closer. She grips his tunic, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest. For a moment, there is no crown, no script, no watching world. Just two lonely souls finding warmth in each other's arms. When they finally pull apart, both of them are breathing hard. Reality crashes back in. Titles: Class, Gossip, Danger. Odette takes a step backward, eyes wide with horror at what she has just done. "This is wrong," she whispers. "I shouldn't have." "Don't say that," he murmurs, his own voice strained. "You're my king," she insists, her voice shaking. "I'm your servant. People like me don't belong in stories like this. If anyone sees, if they even suspect, they'll tear me apart. And you'll be dragged into scandal. They'll say I bewitched you. They'll say you've grown weak." Tears shine in her eyes. "I can't be the reason you fall," she says. Her words wound him more deeply than any blade has ever done. But before he can answer, she turns and flees the room, leaving him standing alone in the soft glow of the fire, torn between chasing her and honoring the fear his own heart has stirred. Odette runs through the corridors, her thoughts a tangled mess of guilt and longing. She ducks into a side passage, pressing her back against the cool stone, forcing herself to breathe. That's when she hears voices again. Madame Beau. And that same smooth-voiced man, Arjates. They are close. Too close. Arjates asks, "Are you sure the king is attached to her?" Madame Beau lets out a bitter little laugh. "Oh, I am certain," she says. "I've seen the way he looks at that little saint. As if she hung the moon herself." There is venom in her tone. "Then she's more useful than I thought," Arjates replies. Madame Beau continues coldly, "If we remove her quietly, he might question it. Investigate. But if we involve her." She leaves the sentence dripping with implication. "A scandal," Arjates says slowly. "A crime. Something that makes him turn away in disgust. Or something that leaves her unable to defend herself at all." They fall briefly silent, the weight of their plotting filling the narrow hall. Madame Beau adds, "The servants see her as some kind of saint. If she is caught stealing from him, or worse." She gives a soft, cruel laugh. "Hearts break more cleanly when they fall from a great height," she says. Odette feels the blood drain from her face. They are planning to destroy her. To use her as a tool to hurt him. She backs away, trying to disappear into the shadows, but her shoulder bumps a stack of folded linens on a nearby shelf. They tumble to the floor in a soft, betraying avalanche. "Who's there?" Madame Beau snaps. Odette runs. Footsteps pound behind her, but she knows the back corridors well. She cuts through a storage room, squeezes behind crates, and holds her breath until the angry footsteps move past and fade. When the danger passes, she slips out from her hiding place, her legs trembling. The enemy of the soul is clever. When he can't stop your kindness, he'll try to destroy your name. When he can't break your faith, he'll try to twist the way others see you. Odette realizes with awful clarity, this is no longer simply about her job. It is about her life. And the king's heart. She decides she has to warn him. To tell him everything she has heard, no matter the cost. But before she can reach his chambers, two guards step into her path. "Odette," one of them says, his tone cold. "You're to come with us." Her stomach drops. "Why?" she asks. "Has something." The other guard interrupts. The head maid reports missing jewelry from the king's private chest. A watch. Rings. Items that were found in your room. The world spins. That's not possible, she protests. I would never. The guards do not meet her eyes. Their orders are clear. They grip her arms and lead her away. Down stone steps. Past heavy doors. Into the damp chill of the palace dungeons. Her protests echo off the walls, but the stone has heard too many pleas to listen. She is thrown into a cell. The iron bars slam shut with a final, echoing clang. Please, she begs, clutching the bars. You have to let me speak to the king. He knows me. He knows I wouldn't. One of the guards pauses, looking at her with tired, conflicted eyes. Don't make it harder on yourself, girl, he says. Just pray he shows mercy. The torchlight fades as they leave her alone in the dark. Odette sinks to the cold floor, her thin dress no match for the chill that seeps into her bones. There she is again, the girl who chose compassion, now wearing the label of a thief. The one whose faith led her into danger, now locked away as if she were the danger. She bows her head, tears falling onto the stone. God, she whispers in a broken voice, if you see me, if you remember me. I need you now. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to clear my name. I don't know how to protect him. Above her, life in the palace goes on. Preparations for the winter ball continue. Nobles arrive in carriages. Musicians tune their instruments. Servants trade rumors in the halls. Word drifts down, piece by piece, through the tiny window high in her cell. The king will announce his engagement at the ball, they say. To a noble lady. Maybe Lady Seraphine. Maybe someone even more grand. Each rumor is a knife. The man she has come to love might stand under glittering lights and promise himself to someone else, while she sits in the dark, branded a criminal. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a fragile hope refuses to die. She remembers the way he looked at her. The way he defended her. The way he opened his heart in the quiet of his study. Would he really believe she had stolen from him? Would he? While she wrestles with despair below, a different kind of plotting unfolds above. In a small, richly decorated room, Madame Bure and Jati stand over a bed covered in silk. Laid out before them is an ivory gown, simple and breathtaking. It is the dress the tailors sent for Odette. A gown she had barely dared to touch. A gown she had never worn. Now it lies in Madame Bure's hands. So this is what the king chose for her, Jati's murmurs. Madame Bure's smile is thin and cruel. He has taste, she says. I'll give him that. She lifts the gown and lets it cascade over her arm. Put it on, she orders. A young servant girl stands nearby, eyes downcast, already half-dressed. She is about Odette's size. Terrified. Trapped. A delicate half-mask, pale and edged with silver, is brought out as well. The king will see what he wants to see, Madame Bure says. A woman in white, coming down the stairs to him. The rest is just illusion. Jati pulls a small vial from his coat. The liquid inside is dark and thick, clinging to the glass like a secret. This will do the rest, he says. Madame Bure's eyes shine with a wicked light. Just a sip, she purrs, and our king will fall. The kingdom will shudder. And who will they blame? She laughs softly. The sweet little maid who stole from his chambers and tried to poison him to avoid punishment, she answers. A perfect story. Tragic. Believable. The girl in the ivory gown trembles. They said if I refuse, she whispers, my family. They will pay, Jati says coldly. So you will not refuse. Madame Bure steps close to the girl, her voice low and threatening. You will walk down the stairs when the music slows, she says. You will hand him the goblet. You will smile. And you will say nothing. Do you understand? The girl nods, eyes shining with helpless tears. The trap is set. Back in the dungeon, Odette shivers, caught between fear and prayer. Time blurs. Hours feel like days. The music from above is faint but real now. The ball has begun. Then, without warning, a key scrapes in the lock. Her cell door creaks open. A young guard stands there, breathing hard, eyes flicking nervously down the corridor. Odette, he whispers, come quickly. She scrambles to her feet. Did the king, she begins. There's no time, the guard says. I can't do much more than this. But you don't belong down here like the others. I'll say I fell asleep at my post and you slipped past. Whatever you do next, make it worth the risk. Tears sting her eyes. Thank you, she says, her voice shaking. I won't forget this. She runs. Up the stone stairs. Through shadowed corridors. Past tapestries and doors and startled servants. The music grows louder, a bright river spilling under heavy doors. She emerges into a side hall near the grand ballroom and stops, chest heaving. Through the slightly open doors, she glimpses light and color, nobles spinning in slow, elegant circles, chandeliers dripping crystal stars, the king standing at the top of the stairs in black and silver. He looks every inch a legend. But his eyes keep drifting to the staircase, as if he is waiting for someone who has not yet appeared. Odette glances down at herself. She wears no silk tonight. No mask. No jewels. Only a simple brown dress, wrinkled from the dungeon floor. Bare feet peep out from beneath the hem. She is a servant in a world of glitter and lies. Sometimes the most important battles are not fought in armor, but in humility. Not with crowns, but with a bare face and a desperate heart. Odette draws a shaky breath. Lord, she whispers, if this is madness, then stand with me in it. Don't let him drink that poison. Don't let them win. She pushes the doors open and steps into the light. The ballroom turns as one to look at her. And high above, on the staircase, the king finally sees her too. The music falters, as if the story itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next.